So on to my favorite. This is going to be now like zooming in on these knots, right? Because it's like, okay, well, we could just take their word for it that these knots happen, these little adhesions happen. What I always teach my clients is that this is not like, you know how like sometimes people will get like a knot in their neck that like you can literally feel it. It's not that. It's not that, but it's not that in general, where like we're talking on a much smaller level where it's almost like on the cellular level, right? Where you're going to be inside of the muscle fiber. So if you look at the figure 1413 here, this is showing you what they look like, right? This is your muscle fiber. So your muscles are going to be stretching and contracting, but you have like these little things in there that bunch them up. Now, that's what it looks like when we zoom all the way in. What does it look like? What does it do to the muscle? It's this, right? This is the bunching up of that muscle. Okay, so tight muscles bunch up, right, into these like little knots and adhesions. Now, what's important to know is that, like, all the time we are making new cells in our body. We don't think about it a lot. I think the only place that we really think about it is our hair, right? Because you like lose the old hair and you know that something is coming in place of it or we would be bald. And your skin, because sometimes you can see the old skin sloughing off. And again, we don't lose our skin, right? But this is happening pretty much everywhere in the body, sometimes at slower rates. So when you're making new muscle, if these knots exist, you don't get a do-over, right? The new muscle is going to lay down the same pattern that was there in the old muscle that it's replacing. So we want to know this definition for Davis's law. This is a very popular test question, but we're also going to understand what it means. So when you see these words, soft tissue, which just means muscle, models, like lays down to make new cells along the lines of stress. Okay, so for the test, soft tissue, stress, you see those things, you're like, okay, that's Davis's law. Soft tissue goes with Davis's law. But what all this is like, Davis was the person that explained this phenomenon, right? That like when you look here and you see these little knots, when new muscle tissue is being created, it is going to do so along the lines of stress, which means the knots are not going away, right? You're just going to get new tissue that bunches up in the same place, all right? So I have with me a pair of women's pantyhose. Well, women who are participating that have worn pantyhose are going to understand this a lot better, but I think it's a good visual because it's kind of hard for our people to understand this. So I want to explain this, not even for us so much as for us explaining this to our clients. All right, so these are women's pantyhose, right? Like stockings, right? This is what we have up top. They're not as popular as they used to be, but usually if you get dressed up, then you might wear these with a dress, right? So when you stretch these, look what happens. Like it gets longer and you can see that everything pulls the way that it should, right? This is like a muscle stretching, contracting, stretching, contracting. Now, when we look down here, it's very easy for pantyhose to get what is called a run, a runner, a tear, where it's like a delicate kind of fabric, right? So as it stretches, then you get this little tear in it. Now, the reason I selected this picture, here's the tear, right? This is the whole tear, top to bottom. But usually within these tears, you get this weird little thing that runs crosswise, right? So no matter how much you stretch out that leg of the stocking, that piece is always going to be running its own way. It's like doing its own thing completely, where it's perpendicular to the leg, right? So we're stretching this way. We want that to stretch with it, but that's on its own channel, right? That's going to be stretching this way. So you can picture if she takes these stockings off and stretches them, that is going to keep going the other direction. Now, a lot of times it's not exactly perpendicular, but that is how I think of it. And that is how I teach people that when we want these muscles to stretch, what is stopping it? And it's these little bunches up, like just like where the runner would be, that's where the knot is in our muscle. And the reason that this muscle is going to stay too short is because that cannot go in this direction anymore. That is doing its own little thing. It has kind of quit the team and it is running this way, so it can't stretch this way. Okay, so that is kind of like, this is everything, right? This is understanding on the smallest level what is happening when we see those feet turn out. This is what's happening in those calf muscles, right? They're going to have a bunch of these little knots that are causing the whole muscle to be too tight and too short. But remember, it's not too short because we lost part of the muscle. It's too short because sections of it are bunched up, are clumped up in there into knots. Okay? All right, so what do we have to do? Here's this picture again. We see this picture again and again because it's so simple, but this is central for us. So we know what we have to do. If we want to take this picture on the right and get it back to be this picture on the left, we need this to get longer, right? The only way for this to get longer is to dissolve those knots, to get rid of those knots, because then that section will now be able to pull the long way again. It's not going to be fighting and pulling in the opposite direction. Okay? So that's what has to happen on this side, right? It has to get longer. Now on this side, this has been like weakened, right? It has lost its tone. We got to get some ability to contract back in there, some strength to it. So we have to strengthen that, but that's not what we're talking about in this chapter, right? So we know we have to work on both sides. Even if we fix this side, the tight side, the damage has already been done to the other. So that needs to appropriately be fixed as well. But right now we're only stretching. So how do we do it?